Thank you for coming for the launch of our school event. I welcome you to the launch of the Jindal School of Art and Architecture. The JSA is a new school located within the Jindal Global University in Sonipat, Haryana. I am Alokparna Sengupta, a faculty in the Jindal School of Art and Architecture. My first degree is in architecture, but I identify myself as an urbanist. My work explores the everyday life of our cities in order to understand issues of inclusion and equity. Our first panel today consists of our founding Vice Chancellor, Professor C. Rajkumar, architect Stefan Pommier, Professor Thomas Michael, and Professor Joydeep Chatterjee. I now welcome our panelists to light the lamp and then proceed onto the stage. Please, if you may. Thank you. Now, a brief introduction about the members of our first panel. It's composed of our Vice Chancellor, Professor C. Rajkumar, Stefan Pommier, Principal Architect of SPA Design Limited, Professor Thomas Michael, the Dean Designate for our school, and Professor Joydeep Chatterjee, the Vice Dean for Jindal School of Art and Architecture. Now, to start with a short introduction of Professor C. Rajkumar. He was appointed as the founding Vice Chancellor of OP Jindal University in India at the age of 34 in 2009. Professor Kumar also serves as the founding Dean of Jindal Global Law School and the Director of the International Institute for Higher Education, Research and Capacity Building. Professor Kumar has academic qualifications from University of Oxford, Harvard University, University of Hong Kong, University of Delhi and the Loyola College. His areas of specialization include human rights and development, comparative constitutional law, terrorism and national security, amongst many others. I now welcome Professor Kumar to give the welcome address. Thank you.
Thank you, Alokparna. First of all, I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you to the inaugural session, also the inaugural symposium, and indeed the launch of the Jindal School of Art and Architecture, the 7th school of OP Jindal Global University. It is indeed a proud privilege for all of us to be having a very distinguished set of individuals who have come together to celebrate the launch of the Jindal School of Art and Architecture. At the outset, I would like to first of all appreciate the leadership of Professor Joydeep for really spearheading the establishment of the school and its evolution from its very modest beginnings several months ago, and also the faculty members who have come together as a part of the Jindal School of Art and Architecture to build this school. We are also very fortunate that the founding dean of the Jindal School of Art and Architecture, Professor Thomas McCall, has come for 2 days from New Zealand to be part of this special occasion before he formally takes over in the next several months and relocate from New Zealand to Sonipat to become the dean of the Jindal School of Art and Architecture. I also want to recognize the presence of Mr. Stefan Pommier, the architect of the OP Jindal Global University. Stefan had walked this journey all along from our very early days when the OP Jindal Global University's location was just a mere set of fields. He saw it through from its very early beginnings, and today we have over 2 million square feet of built up space in the last 8 years, and he had he and his team had spearheaded the effort to build the university. I also would take this moment to reflect about it's very special for us to be doing this here. Many people may not know this, but I'll nevertheless share this with you. This place in particular, India Habitat Center, resonates a lot with the founding ideas of OP Jindal Global University. To be very precise, on the 13th of August 2006, at a dinner at India Habitat Center, and actually in this very location, some of the founding ideas of OP Jindal Global University was discussed. And this was culminated in a meeting that I had with the then Law Minister, Mr. H.R. Bharadwaj, on 14th of August 2006, in which I promoted the idea of establishing a multidisciplinary research-oriented university in India. That conversation led him to ask me a question: what is it that we need to build such a university in India? And I essentially said that we need 3 things. First, I need somebody who can make a substantial financial contribution. Second, the person to make a commitment towards doing it in a not-for-profit manner. And third, to let me have the academic freedom and autonomy and independence to build a world-class university in India. He looked at me, and he was the then law minister, and he said that, let me get back to you. At that time I was teaching in Hong Kong, and when most politicians anywhere in the world say that, one doesn't believe that much, and definitely when an Indian politician says that, one doesn't take it so seriously. Nevertheless, I believed in it, and for several months I didn't hear, and then nearly a couple of months later, he called me up and asked me when I'm coming to India. I said I'm coming for a conference in October, and so he wanted me to meet a person by name Naveen Jindal. I had no idea who Mr. Jindal was. Like most people who discover people, I Googled him and found out that Mr. Naveen Jindal is a parliamentarian, a steel tycoon, did his MBA from the University of Texas in Dallas, and fought one of the most famous cases in constitutional law, the Union of India versus Naveen Jindal, which essentially gave the right to fly the national flag for private individuals. I discovered his own passion for education as well as transformation of the nation through many activities and initiatives that he had promoted. So I got to meet him for the first time in October 2006, and then spent the next 1 year persuading Mr. Jindal to do 3 things which I wanted him to do. Essentially to make a financial contribution, to make a commitment towards doing it in a not-for-profit manner, and to let me have the academic freedom and autonomy and independence to build a university. To cut the story short, by late 2007, Mr. Jindal agreed to all of that and invited me to move to India. I moved to India in early 2008, precisely January 2008. I was on sabbatical leave from my university in Hong Kong, at the City University of Hong Kong, and then for the first 4 months of 2008, trying to figure out myself as I was returning to India after a decade of working and studying abroad. Very quickly I realized the impossibility of doing anything in India at all. Systems were so beautifully designed to ensure that nobody can really do anything. Relatively mediocre practice of corruption, inefficiency, as well as other forms of institutional ineffectiveness had been elevated into a full-fledged science where nobody can really do anything at all. But the journey that I had already taken was far ahead, and hence I decided to quit my job in Hong Kong and took over as the head of the initiative in April 2008. Mr. Jindal had a far-sighted vision. His vision was to build a world-class university in India, and he was deeply committed to the values of academic freedom and institutional autonomy, and also resources that are needed to build such a university. April 2008, I quit my job in Hong Kong, and we began the process of institution building from scratch. Land acquisition, formulation of curriculum, course structure, program development, faculty recruitment plan, student admissions process, hiring of architects, and that's where Stefan Pommier came in. And also persuading the government of Haryana to pass a legislation. We were the first university in the state of Haryana which was being promoted as a private university, and that was an extraordinary effort, persuading the then Chief Minister, the Governor, and 20 different committees within the government to persuade to essentially pass a legislation. As late as 27 January 2009, the government of Haryana passed a legislation establishing O.P. Jindal Global University as the first private university in the state of Haryana. Today there are over 22 private universities in the state of Haryana, including our neighbor Ashoka University, Saram University, and other such institutions. We began that journey in a very modest manner. Soon after, I was appointed the first Vice Chancellor of the university, and then we began the process of recruitment of faculty, admission of students, as well as construction of campus. In a span of nearly over 6 to 7 months, we built an entire campus, including the first academic block, but also student housing, and we began in a very modest manner as promised to Mr. Jindal on 30th September 2009 with only 100 students and 10 faculty members and one school, the Jindal Global Law School. We never looked back since then. In 2010, we started the Jindal Global Business School. In 2011, the Jindal School of International Affairs. In 2012, the Jindal School of Government and Public Policy. In 2013, the Jindal School of Liberal Arts and Humanities. In 2016, the Jindal School of Journalism and Communication. In 2017, the Jindal School of Art and Architecture, and the Jindal School of Banking and Finance, both of which will begin its first academic session on 1st of August 2018. We moved from, say, 100 students in the year 2009 to today, we have nearly 4,000 students. We moved from a 10-member faculty to over 300-member full-time faculty. We moved from a 50-acre campus to a nearly 100-acre campus. We moved from 100,000 square feet of built-up space to over 2 million square feet of built-up space. This journey that we have covered in the last 8 years has been an extraordinarily inspiring journey for all of us who have been part of it, including the faculty members, the students and staff. And I would like to believe that most of our faculty members who have chosen to come to Sonipat, it is not a job that they're doing. It is a calling in life that has brought people from around the world and from India to be part of this institutional imagination. Today we are indeed chartering a new course of history. Establishment of the Jindal School of Art and Architecture is a very important step in the direction of the evolution of the university. For the first time, we are moving beyond our core comfort zone, which is in the field of humanities, social sciences, and a few professional schools such as law and business. We have resisted for a while not to establish a school of engineering, not to establish a school of medicine, not to establish schools in hard sciences, including natural and physical sciences. The closest we are going towards that direction is the School of Art and Architecture, and Jaideep, of course, had made it more and more inclined towards several aspects of humanities and social sciences, deeply integrated into the School of Art and Architecture. I believe that as the school evolves, it will draw upon other disciplines and other areas within the university and the other schools that we have in the university. I want to spend the next few minutes talking a bit about our journey. The most important characteristics of this university is our strong international character. We are a global university. As one of my colleagues in the university tells, global is our middle name. And that comes with a lot of responsibilities, which essentially means that we need to focus on international engagement in very broad terms. For us, international engagement includes many things. Firstly, it includes recruitment of faculty. Nearly 20% of our full-time faculty members are non-Indian nationals recruited from 21 different countries in the world. And nearly 50% of the deans of the 8 schools that we have are also people who have recruited from different parts of the world. This essentially means that our institutional vision and our institutional imagination is closely connected to the world at large. Also, it becomes important for us to build substantive international collaborations with universities around the world. In the last 8 years, we've built collaborations with over 225 universities spread across 52 different countries in the world, in which we have implemented 10 different forms of collaborations, which include faculty exchange, student exchange, joint teaching, joint research, joint conferences, joint publications, dual degree programs, short-term study abroad programs, inward mobility immersion programs, as well as joint executive education programs. It also means for us to be able to build a research university, and it's an important aspect of our university's vision, and that's the second attribute of our university. It has been lamented time and again that not a single Indian university is one of the top 200 in the world, and it is important for us to build a university that focuses on research culture while not neglecting the importance of teaching and inspiration through teaching as well. And this is a delicate balance which universities need to strike, and we are attempting to do that, and we have achieved some degree of success in the last 8 years. The third aspect of our university is a strong commitment to public service in all its forms and manifestations. Over 70% of our students are studying with some form of scholarship or the other. We strongly believe that access to high quality education is a very critical public and common good that we need to pursue, and private universities ought to be deeply committed to the idea of public service. And that's reflected in what we do as an institution, but also it's reflected in what our faculty members do in pursuing such experiential learning and other such activities. The fourth aspect of our university is a strong commitment to creating an intellectually vibrant environment through conferences, lectures, and workshops. And the fifth is what we do through executive education and continuing education. Our journey is still far away. We have the next 15-year strategic plan designed, and we intend to grow from strength to strength in the years to come. We intend to expand our university without compromising on our commitment to quality. We maintain a 1:13 faculty-student ratio. The vision of our Chancellor, Mr. Jindal, is to ensure that as we expand in terms of size, we continue to maintain the kind of quality and excellence that we have been deeply committed to in the past. It's also useful to mention that our vision is that in the next 15 years, we plan to grow in size, and our proposed strength is to have nearly 17,000 plus students in the next 15 years. Nearly 1,700 plus faculty members in the next 15 years, which will ensure that we maintain a 1:10 faculty-student ratio. We intend to have a fourfold increase in our physical strength in terms of our buildings and architecture, the design of those buildings, and I'm sure the addition of the Jindal School of Art and Architecture will contribute to new imaginations that we will contribute towards that. I want to end by saying that establishment of schools in India or universities in India is not a new thing. We started in India with 20 universities at the dawn of Indian independence, and today we have nearly 1,000 universities. We have 40,000 plus colleges, 5,000 plus business schools, and over 1,500 law schools. Every state is building new universities more and more. And I would like to believe that with over 300 plus architecture schools, the Jindal School of Art and Architecture is one more such school that we are launching today. However, I would like to hope that it is not one more such school. The conglomeration of distinguished architects, institution builders, professors, people who work in the field of architecture, all of them coming together to celebrate and to mark this special occasion reflects the vision and the strength of the idea of building a new school of art and architecture. I can only hope that this effort that has brought together all of you will continue to help the school to grow from strength to strength and will help us fulfill our commitment to achieving excellence. It is also useful to mention that in the last 8 years, the OP Jindal Global University has also achieved important distinctions. We have, in the 6th year itself, achieved what is known as the ultimate accreditation within India, called the NAC A accreditation, the highest accreditation grade which any Indian university can get. We got it in the 6th year itself. We also have been declared as one of the autonomous universities in the country. Only 52 Indian universities have been given autonomy by the Ministry of Human Resource Development and UGC Government of India a few weeks ago, and we are one of only 2 private universities in the whole of India which have been given the status of an autonomous institution. Also, in the context of QS rankings, we have been declared as the university which is one of the top 250 to 300 among the 9,000 universities across the BRICS region, and the youngest university to have been breaking into the international rankings. Among all these things, the last and most important thing which we are very proud of is that we have been declared as the cleanest university in the country under the Swachhta rankings of higher education institutions, in which over 3,000 institutions participated, 300 were shortlisted, and we were declared as the first and cleanest university. All these things augurs well for the establishment of the Jindal School of Art and Architecture, and I want to take this moment to congratulate the Dean and the Vice Dean and the faculty members, all of whom who have put together this program and to the effort to create the School of Art and Architecture. I also want to particularly thank my colleague, Professor Y.S.R. Murthy, the Registrar of the University, Professor Sudarshan, the Dean of the Jindal School of Government and Public Policy, and all other colleagues who have joined us to celebrate, Professor Ajay Pandey from the Jindal Global Law School, and many others who have come together to celebrate the occasion of the establishment of the new School of Art and Architecture. Best wishes to all of you, and thank you.
Thank you, Raj. I now welcome architect Stéphane Pommier, who is the principal architect behind the design of the Jindal University campus, to share his thoughts.
I would like to thank you, the university, to invite me to make mostly a visual illustration of what Raj Kumar just explained in terms of kind of the evolution of the campus from the beginning, the kind of history behind how to build such an institution in such a short time. So this is the strategy that had gone behind like locating some land, because as you know, the city of Delhi is extremely expensive. It's becoming very difficult to manage to gather something like 50 acre, 200 acre. So they looked at the periphery of the NCR, and Sonipat appeared to be an interesting place 10 years ago, which was not too expensive, which was still affordable. And also next door to the NH1, which goes to Chandigarh, there was the Rajiv Gandhi Educational City, where today you have Ashoka, which at that point was kind of a very sleepy educational area made of, I think, something that the government didn't plan properly, because it was more an area developed for institute or relatively small colleges. There was no vision of actually developing very large campuses. So one of the things they looked at when acquiring the land was how can we manage to gather a big area. So we had to come out of this educational city, which also was developing very, very slowly, and located some land on the other side, which needed some land use change from agricultural to institutional. The location was also chosen because it's very close to the junction of the NH1 and the new road that is still getting built right now, which is the KPM Expressway, which will be the new ring road linking Manesar to Sonipat. So when we were called, we got a call on 1st of April, April Fool, to develop a university in 18 months. So we thought it was some kind of a farce. But no, we were also instrumental in advising the owner in choosing the land, because there were multiple choices. But buying land in India is a rather peculiar business, where you can't buy actually a large piece of land at once. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. You buy acre by acre, negotiate, it goes to court. So we managed to somehow, in 10 years, consolidate a relatively nice shape of a pentagon. But this is the land. It is completely bare, it is flat, it is agricultural land, it's actually very fertile. But there is no significant feature in this land. It's a complete abstract blank sheet. So we started by looking at geometry, the shape of the land, at least what we had in mind. After a few years, that much will be consolidated. We started working with very large square, very large geometric forms, because we were in pure abstraction. There was no hills, there was no forest, there was nothing except maybe a nala that was going on the northeast. So there was nothing. So geometry was a help to start planning, and to start also planning with possible extension, so that you could imagine that the scheme, which was not very clear in terms of programmatic requirement, could evaluate. So we started a kind of classical garden, I would say, which was which was taking that shape with low-rise building but high density. The first scheme was to do housing which would be ground plus one, with the faculty in the middle, the academic function, and the housing on the side, but very low-rise. But then it became clearly impossible to have that kind of scheme with all the external space for sport and all facility, plus the density of the number of students. So this was the original scheme, which was low-rise but high density and relatively little open space with a big square in the middle, which had all the faculty, keeping in mind that it was never seen as a collection of different faculty. Since the beginning, we had in mind that this university will teach things that the VC, me, nobody really knew, except we started with a law school. But 10 years ago, we didn't know how it could evolve. What we knew is that we should avoid the mistake which is made very often of having dedicated faculty block per discipline, which don't really encourage cross-disciplinary inquiry, exchange and all that. It has the tendency to become small fortress which don't really talk to each other, which is what has happened to many universities in India or everywhere in the world. That how can we be so sure that that faculty with that name has nothing to share with this faculty with that name? The more we progress, the more we know that things have to be exchanged, and also that's a way to achieve relatively high density and efficiency, because in a university, a lot of rooms are typical. They can be exchanged, they are classrooms, they are offices, they keep changing. So then we went to a slightly more open scheme where the faculty block was this 9 square kind of mandala in the middle, the housing of the teacher and the professor on the extreme edge, and the village of the student in the center. But that was not giving us the requirement for the student. So then we came up with something more dense, which is relatively close to what is the campus today, except that the circle at the entrance, which was a convention center, is now a sports center. But you can recognize the middle with the academic block and the periphery with the housing. Now this is the campus today. This is what has been built, which is pretty much more than a half. And what we realized also is you have the Nala that is in front on the northeast. At the back, on the west, you have the railway track going to Chandigarh. And what we realized is bang in between was the Grand Trunk Road, because we could locate Kosmina all the way from Sonipat going to Delhi. So the historical road, which doesn't exist anymore because it got covered by redivision of land and the kind of square division per acre, was coming between, at the back of the university, actually, between the railway track and this Nala. So we are on an historical site in some way. Now what we came up with, the first scheme was that building should be flexible, because nobody had really a clear idea of what was to be taught. So there were hard kind of center, that this auditorium which are in the middle of the courtyard, and the bridges, what I call the bridges, which are these long steel structure, don't have any structure inside, so they can be completely repartitioned, redivided. They are not set in stone, to say so, because at every break in summer, they can be repartitioned according to the new curriculum, to the new program, to the side of the class. So everything is relatively flexible, except the auditorium and the reception of the library. Then there was this big question of the flag, which was a big question for us, because we were told that there will be a big flag, and there was a big flag. The flag was around 100 feet by 40 feet, which is almost the size of a building. So how do you accommodate that in your design? Because if you ignore it and it comes, it's like the nose in your face. So we started pixelating that flag into our building and using the color of the flag in a multi-layer manner. So the kind of very thin line you see is the line of the structure, and then the glass which comes behind as the color of the Indian flag, and the reflection, which is visible at certain time of the day, not all the time, but basically we decided that, okay, let's take that flag as almost a reflection on the building. Now this is the building as it is today. So the red structure that you can see on long term is supposed to be in the middle of a forest. Now the trees, this picture is taken 5 years ago. Now the trees are growing. We really expect the truss to almost disappear in a kind of urban oasis. This is the truss that you can see, which carries the building from the outside. So inside is completely flexible to change and to modify. Below, we put all the building on pilotis. So the idea was that underneath the university, when you are not in your classrooms or in your hostel room, you have a covered space which is shaded but not air conditioned. So how to use external space which are usable even in summer. It's always a big fight. VC wants air conditioned space. The fight is going on. Encroachments are going on. This is the view of the building at night. So you can see a relatively industrial image of what the building is, because it was actually done as almost an industrial structure in its planning and its methodology and in its execution. Meanwhile, you have this courtyard which have the auditorium, which are fixed point, and all the gallery around with open corridor and open circulation. This is the central auditorium, which get natural light. This is the reception of the library where you enter from. This is the reading room of the library, which has been changed temporarily for the architect studio, I understand. Now, this is the fabrication. All that has to be understood from the mode of construction and the mode of fabrication. This is the facade that was executed on the ground by Larsen and Toubro, which is a structural facade, and then it was lifted up with huge cranes. So you can see the site during this 18 months of erection, where everything was prefabricated and everything then came up like that in big elements. So in a way, the technology used for making it possible was an industrial technology with planning that is not really used for institution. It's more used for factories and things like this. But as you see, it could go very fast and it could manage to achieve this target. Now, the site was a desert. At the beginning, one should understand that living there was not, it was quite an experience. You were in the middle of nowhere. There was barely any landscape, trees took time, it was bare land. And we can see we're in the plain of the Yamuna because the soil is very sandy. It used to be an inundated area many centuries ago. So now the project has changed. In a way, it has densified as well as it's gone a bit more vertical, but we managed to keep two very large parks. One which is more ornamental where the flag is coming, and one which is dedicated to sport on the other side. We've kept, instead of the central square, it's become a rectangle of squares which have the different schools, but they're all interconnected. And this is the vision of the university in probably 10 years. I would say this is for 10,000 students. I think it's pretty much the limit for this kind of 100-acre land. In the center, the square has become the sports center with the swimming pool that has been inaugurated yesterday. The right side is built, the left side is partially built or under progress. So these are illustrations that show how the campus will be, I think, in 10 years. Now, what does that mean for the School of Architecture? So the planning of this academic block was made of bridges and courtyard, you could say. So what the three squares which are on the right are the existing block. The rectangle, which is the fort on the right, is the canteen that is getting built now. And the last block, which is on your left, is the School of Architecture, which will be a full square. With the difference of this is the School of Architecture, School of Art, they can share a lot with the rest of the university. They can share classroom, they can share auditorium, they can share many faculty rooms, but there is something that is specific, unlike the other discipline, which is the studio. The studios, the workshops. So in this block, what we propose is in the middle, you have a square-shaped building, which will be 6th floor, which will have like a beehive. It will have all the studios piled up together, which will be a studio of art, architecture. They will be relatively flexible again. They will be able to be one large studio or two studio or four medium-sized studio. So this is what comes. The rest of the room around which form the courtyard are rooms which will be shared with the rest of the university. They are classroom, they are auditorium, they are faculty room. These are the main category. What we learn also in this project is that for 1 square meter of education space, you need around 3 square meters of housing for the student. So the ratio is 1:3. That means what I'm not showing today is the housing, because it's too long. It represents a large mass. It's around 75% or 66-75% of the entire mass of the campus. So this building will be completing, you could say, the 3 square will become 5 square. The building will be as long as 250 meter. And the 2 last blocks are the block which have the School of Architecture. It's going to be the west facade. This is the facing block, the facing north, which will have another entrance. Right now, we really enter from the east, and the west is a kind of dead end. Now we are recreating a frontage and an entrance on the west side with the same technology of wrapping around steel, flexibility inside, and a core with the you can see on the top there is 2 more levels, which will be the highest point in the campus, will be given to architects. I'm giving back to my profession. They will be above the lawyers. That's what matters most. And inside we'll have different space. These are images which are just illustrative to show that there will be different studios, having robotic, having industrial design at terms, having model making, exhibition. So all that will become the beehive, I would say, at the west side of the university. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stefan. I now invite the Dean Designate, Professor Thomas Michael, to please come and give the inaugural address. Thank you.
I'm very pleased to be here. I'm going to try to speak succinctly about a topic that has fascinated me for over 27 years of teaching architecture. My background is I have 4 degrees in architecture, a doctorate in architectural theory, and I'm going to steal the phrase that global is my middle name, which I've also passed on to my descendants. I say that because I've been a tenured professor in the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, visiting professor in Vienna, and most recently Tongji University. I've had fellowships at the London School of Economics, the Fulbright, Getty, DAD, keynote on hypermodernity at the Max Planck Institute. But my interest in India actually goes quite a way back. I've been reminded to thank Professor Menon for approving in 2004 my Fulbright application to come to India and study at the TVD, which was interrupted only by a surprise pregnancy by my wife. In 2011, I was selected to come to the NEH Summer Institute on Modernism in India here in Delhi, and that was also organized by the American Institute of Indian Studies. In 2012, I came back as a Future Institute Fellow to do work on Future India Urbanism as a book and participate in the Sarai Reader that came out that year. I was happy to come back to Madras 2015 to do a keynote at a large conference on everyday life in India, which is a recurring topic, and I think you'll hear more about that in the subsequent presentations. I've been fortunate to work with a great range of PhD students pretty much around the globe now, writing on topics of interest, including informal architecture, post-industrial spaces, and almost all examining the fine-grained texture of the fabric of everyday life. I think this is actually crucial for understanding that as the locus for looking for new forms of agency. And these new forms of agency reciprocate with new types of spatial formation, and for me, conceptually, that's the space that architecture occupies. I have a lot of arguments and debates in my role as an academic leader around something that we heard was quite important, and that is studio culture. Axiom number 1 for good design schools is studio culture. That's where all the excitement happens. That's the cauldron that forges disciplines and new disciplines. That's where industry and academics come together. That is the place where communities of practice are instituted, and that is the place where, in many cases, myself included, students find themselves and find their way. So we find that studio culture is paramount and a crucial core, almost an undercurrent, supporting all of the things that we do in our relatively sophisticated profession that we practice. Reciprocating with that as well is the opportunity of using Delhi and other global cities as urban laboratories. So the conceptualization of the school and its global practice will engage with multiple forms of urbanism and spatial practices within urbanism as processes of questioning, not dogma or formalism, but questioning. Towards this end, in studio, we pursue something that's often called iterative or reflexive processes, processes of refinement, something very different than scientific proofs. And often in this process, we implicitly, and I think we should more explicitly, analyze how values are produced through iterative processes as well. I edited a book series called Architectural Intelligences that was developed specifically to look at how to activate discrete knowledge domains that move in and through architecture. That is to say, designers design for people, with people, and in some ways they are transitive in that sense. They're always in relationship to something else. The way that we pursue knowledge in architecture, whether it's everything from material science to meta-urbanism, we look for disciplines and practices, a range of, a suite, I guess, of approaches based on adjacency, things that are proximate or close to the things that we know or are interested, and then find forms of entanglement for that. So that's something that happens very organically in design studios, moving from the familiar to the unfamiliar, appropriating the unfamiliar into your core knowledge, and then using that as a basis for the next round of iterative questioning. In this process, I think we need to rethink the future of design schools because they can become quite pedantic, particularly when they're restricted on resources, and to think about the fact that the professions have to exist in the future. We cannot teach current practices to students today because, as the Wall Street Journal famously said many decades ago, in 10 years they will be holding jobs that don't exist using technologies that haven't been invented. So we have to actually teach a different type of cognitive process through education. In running a design school that I'm currently at, we often talk about the idea of shaping the curriculum around the T-shaped student. And the T-shaped student is a pictogram of this idea of interdisciplinarity. The depth of it comes from knowing one discipline well, of having some knowledge to bring to the table for iterative conversations and collaborations. The cross, the horizontal element of the T-shaped student, is that ability to perhaps ice skate or to move quickly across different knowledge domains and find ways to integrate or to at least have them resonate. So the idea of the T-shaped student, I think, is an important part of studio culture. You develop disciplinary expertise, but if you keep it to yourself, you're not very helpful. If you start to share it and spread it and engage with other T-shaped students or other T-shaped practitioners, then magic can happen. I'm just going to close by saying that this is a little bit of my background and a little bit of my position, but we have the opportunity in making a new design school and a new pedagogy in a new environment. And it's a rare opportunity to rethink, but also to be brave and to take risks. And I think we should be very risk savvy as opposed to risk averse, particularly as society is moving the other direction. There's a saying that I often heard in the United States, change or be changed. We have an opportunity to provocatively engage with history and heritage, not simply in a preservationist mode. And for this, I value chats I've had with Nalini at the SPA and just recently Mimi here at JGU, but also the opportunity how new digital humanities allow us to understand history and heritage. I think there's an opportunity to reformat new institutions for new society and using new media. And already in the last 2 days, I've had a lot of conversations with the deans of the other schools, and there's a lot of schools in this new university. So a lot of deans I've met looking for intentional and accidental overlaps and how those can actually become productive resources or gardens for producing strange and wonderful flowers of knowledge. I think there's a global mandate for sustainability and social impact that spreads across the design spectrum, but also into other areas too. And often our students bring that to us as an ethical imperative, which in many ways flavors how we even imagine the profession, not simply as a disciplinary autonomous silo, but as part of a much larger spectrum based on ideas of care and an ethos of sharing and responsibility. Personally, I tend to follow Guattari's 3 ecologies model of the mental, social, environmental. And when I'm running budgets, we try to use triple bottom line accounting, not simply looking at financial values, but looking at social values and ecological values too. I think the school is in a good position to start to jump right in questions around global practice, as well as global pedagogy. We have diverse international staff, and that will continue. We will diversify our international students, and everyone will have international experiences as part of the core DNA of their architectural education. I believe that we need to design futures not simply design solutions, but design futures. And we should do that by prototyping, our favorite design technique. We prototype models to solve spatial issues. We also prototype concepts to solve intellectual issues. And probably our most valuable contribution, prototyping values for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you. I now invite the Vice Dean of our school, Professor Chatterjee, to please come and give a short.
Good evening, everyone. Hello. I'd like to warmly welcome everyone to the launch symposium of the Jindal School of Art and Architecture. Thank you for taking the time to be here with us on this very special day. I would also like to take this moment to thank Raj, our Vice Chancellor, who I actually refer to as the tour de force and the main energy behind everything Jindal. It was interesting, right? I used to think I had a lot of energy till I met Raj, right? He's unbelievable that way. Right. I also like to welcome Tom, our Dean Designate, who was kind enough to make the trip down here from New Zealand. Tom would be formally joining us later this year. Tom, we're extremely excited to have you on board. Yeah. Okay. Stefan, thank you so much for creating this very unique campus, which I argue embodies in its design many of the questions of interdisciplinarity, collaborative practices, and explicit knowledge practices that we believe are central to what we are trying to do at the JSA here. Thank you so much for that. I'm especially honored to stand before all of you to present the horizon and the programs of this school. But in order to do so, I would like to take a short detour and share with all of you a story that Badri, who I'm sure is sitting somewhere here, shared with me when I was a doctoral student ethnographically recording experiences of being architects in India. Because it is such a wonderful story, I will narrate it in full, so please bear with me. I'm not going to try and do a Badri, but this is how he started. He said, this is the very beginning of my career, Joydeep. I was just out of college and working with Katie. I just saw Katie move coming here. So Katie, you've got to corroborate this story, right? And in those days, Badri continued, we were involved with some projects in and around Delhi. One such project was to design a small community hall for this village. This was a very small project, hardly anything. I just had to provide the drawings for the buildings. There was no site visit, nothing, just to make the drawings. Now, while I was working, I began to wonder if my drawings would make sense to guys on site, especially since there was not to be any contact between me and them. So I had an ingenious idea. Instead of making the drawings according to the standard conventions, that is, the plan on one sheet, elevation on the next, and so on and so forth, I took a big sheet, I made the plan in the center, then the front elevation below it, right? The back elevation above it, the right elevation on the right-hand side, and so on. Happy with myself, I sent off the drawing to the site. Months later, Badri continued, that the building was built, there was a small opening ceremony for it, and I'm invited, so I go there. The ceremony takes place, the building looks fine, everything is great, everyone is happy. I'm then introduced to the master mason as the architect of this place. We get talking. I tell him the building looks great, what a great job he has done, etc., etc. When suddenly, this guy fishes out the drawing I had made. He then points to the center of the plan and says, "Sir, we have made this one building. When are we going to make the other 4 buildings?" Right? So, hilarities and jokes aside, I mentioned Badri's story because to me, this story is extremely telling about a number of issues that concern all of us who are in one way or the other intimately involved with the production of the built environment. At one level, I also believe that this story is very telling of the level of craft and skill that one finds in this country and how such skill produces the environmental variant of our existence. At another level, I find this story very telling about the question of translation, that is the translation of ideas to drawings, from drawings to building, and so on and forth, which I will argue we architects and designers often overlook and unproblematically assume as being seamless, since it is precisely this idea of seamlessness that continually buttresses our claims to architecture, design, and being architects. But more than any of these, I bring up this story today because I believe it continually points us to what I call a constitutive outside of designers' knowledge and of designers in our everyday. It is constitutive because it is always and already accompanying our practice, outside because we continue to tend to deny its being in our efforts to emerge as experts. At the JSA, however, we intend to flip these things over and engage and indeed begin from this constitutive outside, as it were, to reproduce, maintain, represent, contest, and create the built environment. And if this is the horizon of the condition of possibilities that encounter us, what I would like to do next is place before all of you some principles and ideals that animate and guide the practices of the Jindal School of Art and Architecture. The first of these is to foster an environment where design, indeed any form of knowledge, is not seen as a finite, autonomous, pre-given domain, but rather a terrain which is as much in the making as the very object it seeks to investigate, represent, and reproduce. Following this is our second principle, which rejects the idea of a singular understanding of the designer, architect, practitioner of the built environment. Instead, we wish to provide learners with a multidisciplinary, intellectually rigorous, and open-ended environment where they can chart their own trajectories, thereby reproducing themselves as critical and self-reflective agents in the constitution, representation, maintenance, and reproduction of the built environment. The third principle driving us is our belief that as practitioners involved in the sustenance, contestation, representation, and reproduction of the built environment, we are perhaps uniquely positioned to imagine and foster an intellectual framework that moves beyond binary modes of thinking that constantly opposes experts to laymen, education to practice, entrepreneurship to criticality, theory to practicality, thinking to doing, making, and so on. Finally, but perhaps most importantly, the fourth principle which guides us is the idea that learning only happens and knowledge is only produced when learners, that is both faculty and students, collaborate as peers and as active agents. We at the JSA have put together two programs which attempt to concretize, and the pun is fully intended, these principles. The first program is the professional undergraduate degree, the Bachelor's of Architecture. This, as many of you are aware, is a 5-year program which, accredited by the Council of Architecture, would allow a graduate to register themselves as a professional architect in the country and use the title and the style architect. The second program we are launching in the coming academic year is a bit less known. It is an undergraduate program in Built Environment Studies. It's a Bachelor of Arts honors in Built Environment Studies. Launched as one of its kind program in the country, we see it as being of extreme interest to all those who wish to affect the built environment in no less meaningful ways, whether this be through the fine arts, the social sciences, the humanities, the sciences, the technology, through law, that is either as artists, historians, policymakers, lawyers, environmental consultants, development experts. This program combines creative practices in the other disciplines in a unique manner and in unprecedented ways. While there are many particular ways in which these programs manifest the ideals that we have outlined, I would like to mention just two. The first are the minor courses of study, which form an integral part of both programs. While the minor course of study is by and of itself not such a new phenomenon in design schools, where we differentiate ourselves is how we understand the minor course of study itself. For us, the minor study programs of study are neither specializations nor disciplinary formations whose job is to buttress the master narrative of design. We see the minor course as a moment in which learners delve into how similar problematics as the ones they are dealing with are framed from completely different, often antagonistic standpoints, disciplinary standpoints. Being a part of the Jindal Global University, which has established 6 premier schools already, we are extremely fortunate to be able to offer to our prospective students 16 such minor programs to choose from. Each of these, we hope, would enable the learners to fashion themselves as uniquely positioned practitioners with multiple sets of skills that they are adept in. A further way which the principles of the schools manifest themselves in our programs is the design studio itself, that central space which is at the heart of any design education. After a foundation year, which is common to both programs, learners at the JSA would not need to follow a preset path through the design studio. We intend to offer them multiple thematically arranged studios that would enable learners to stretch themselves along multiple lines, also along multiple lines of design inquiry. What is more, the programs are also structured to allow vertical integrations of these studios in which learners at different stages of maturity can actually come together, learn from each other, collaborating as peers with faculty who, as we mentioned earlier, are the first amongst learners. Our hope is that taken together, these kind of structural innovations, and there are many more, I would request you to please go through the brochure, along with the ideas that we have presented today, will help us achieve what is surely our unspoken aim, to become one of the foremost centers of learning in the world, which will produce a paradigmatic shift in the making and the discourse about the built environment globally. Thank you.
Thank you, Joydeep. That was really an interesting overview of what we are all working on together for the school. So this is the end of our first panel, and I thank all the 4 speakers.